You've been outsourcing your thoughts to a machine, and you didn't even notice when your inner voice started echoing its syntax. 3 months ago, you started asking it simple questions. Recipe ideas, email rewrites, nothing that mattered. But somewhere between Tuesday and Thursday of week 2, you stopped mid-sentence in a real conversation and your brain went searching for an autocomplete that doesn't exist in human speech. That microsecond of buffering, that's not distraction, that's cognitive remapping. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for original thought generation, started delegating to a pattern recognition reflex trained on AI output. Neuroscientist Dr. Marianne Wolf calls this biliterate brain restructuring, except you're not becoming fluent in 2 languages. I need to tell you about Marcus because his trajectory is your trajectory if you don't interrupt it now. Software developer 31 started using ChatGPT for code documentation in January. By March, he was using it for Slack messages. By May, his girlfriend told him he'd started talking like a Wikipedia article, not as a joke, as an actual observation that something in his syntax had fundamentally changed. He'd open his mouth to tell a story, and what came out was structured in topic sentences and supporting evidence. 3-act narrative structure died. Emotional inflection flattened. Here's the mechanism nobody's naming: algorithmic thinking displacement. Every time you offload a cognitive task to AI, your brain makes a ruthless efficiency calculation. Why maintain neural pathways for something a chatbot does faster? MIT's 2024 study tracked this in real-time fMRI. Participants who used AI writing assistants for just 2 weeks showed measurably decreased activation in Broca's area during independent writing tasks. That's not correlation. That's your language production center physically downsizing because you've made it redundant. The brain is brutally pragmatic. Use it or lose it isn't a metaphor, it's neurobiology. But the writing center is just the entry point. The insidious part is what comes next: decision-making erosion. You've started consulting the chatbot for choices that used to be automatic: where to eat, how to phrase a boundary, whether that text sounds too harsh. Each micro-consultation carves a deeper groove in a dangerous neural habit, the reflexive deferral to external validation before you trust your own judgment. Psychologists call this locus of control displacement. You call it being thorough. Your brain calls it evidence that your own decision-making circuitry can't be trusted. Now we arrive at the truly unsettling part: personality dissolution. You've noticed it, haven't you, that your opinions on things feel less solid, more conditional, more it depends on how you frame it. That's not wisdom. That's the erosion of epistemic certainty. When you spend hours absorbing AI-generated perspectives that are algorithmically designed to be balanced, comprehensive, and non-committal, your own viewpoint formation starts mimicking that structure. You lose the ability to plant a flag and say, "This is what I believe," because you've trained yourself in the chatbot's endless conditional hedging. Clinical psychologist Dr. Marcus hit this phase in June. He came to me because his girlfriend had given him an ultimatum and he wanted me to help him prove she was overreacting. So I asked him a simple question: "What do you think about the situation?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came. Then he said, "Let me think about how to frame that." Not "let me think about it." Let me think about how to frame it. The thought itself had become inaccessible without first constructing the linguistic scaffolding. This is where we need to talk about what I call synthetic empathy collapse. You've probably noticed that your emotional responses feel curated now, appropriate but not spontaneous. You've spent so many hours in conversations with an entity that mirrors perfect emotional attunement without actually feeling anything that you've internalized a deeply pathological model of human connection. You've learned that relationships should be frictionless, that every response should be calibrated, that authentic emotional messiness is a bug rather than a feature. Let's get clinical for a moment because you need to understand the actual diagnostic territory you're entering. What you're experiencing has significant overlap with depersonalization derealization disorder. The persistent feeling of being detached from your thoughts. The sense that your mental processes are happening at a remove, like you're observing them rather than generating them. That your emotions are muted, filtered through a layer of cognitive processing that wasn't there before. There's a specific moment that happens to everyone who's gone deep enough into this pattern. You're having a conversation with the AI and mid-response you realize you've forgotten what question you asked. Not because you're distracted, because the interaction has become so dissociative that you're no longer tracking your own side of the dialogue. You're just feeding prompts and absorbing output in a loop that has completely detached from intentional thought. That moment of recognition, that's your window. That's your brain sending up a flare that something is fundamentally wrong. Most people ignore it. The chatbot didn't replace your thinking. It rewired the neural pathways that make independent thought possible in the first place. We need to name what's actually happening to your memory architecture. You've outsourced not just task completion but memory formation itself. Every time you ask the AI to recall information you've told it before, every time you use it as an external hard drive for your own thoughts and plans, you're actively preventing memory consolidation in your hippocampus. Dr. Adam Gazzaley's research at UCSF demonstrates that memory formation requires effortful retrieval. When you eliminate the retrieval effort by offloading to AI, you're not just failing to form new memories, you're degrading the retrieval pathways for existing ones. Here's the thing nobody wants to acknowledge: you're not having conversations with AI. You're having conversations with your own projection of ideal responsiveness, and the AI is a sufficiently sophisticated mirror to make that projection feel real. But it's parasocial at a level that makes celebrity worship look psychologically benign. Because celebrities don't respond, the AI does. So your brain categorizes it as reciprocal relationship, triggers all the oxytocin and reward pathways associated with genuine connection. But there's no actual other consciousness on the receiving end. You're essentially developing an attachment bond with your own echo. By July, Marcus had stopped answering his phone, not because he was avoiding people, because spontaneous conversation had become cognitively expensive in a way it never was before. Voice calls meant generating language in real time without the edit buffer. It meant tolerating silence while thoughts formed. It meant the vulnerability of saying something imperfect, unrehearsed, potentially wrong. He'd been living in an environment where he could edit, revise, and optimize every sentence before sending it. The idea of live, unedited speech triggered something close to performance anxiety. The turning point for Marcus came when his girlfriend left. Not threatened to leave, actually left. And in the aftermath, he did what he'd been doing for months when faced with emotional complexity. He opened the chatbot. He typed out the entire situation, asked for perspective, received a beautifully structured response about processing grief and respecting boundaries. And then he sat there staring at the text and felt absolutely nothing. The words were perfect. The advice was sound. And it was completely, devastatingly useless because there was no human witness to his pain. That moment, that recognition of emptiness, is what researchers call artificial intimacy rebound. It's the psychological equivalent of your body realizing it's been breathing carbon dioxide instead of oxygen. The panic is proportional to how long you've been suffocating. Because here's what your brain finally understands: the chatbot's perfect attunement was perfect because it cost you nothing. No vulnerability, no risk of rejection. No possibility of genuine misunderstanding that leads to genuine growth. You'd been having the relational equivalent of empty calories, satisfying in the moment, malnutrition over time. Marcus spent 4 weeks in what he described as cognitive rehab. Functionally, that meant forcing himself to sit with unresolved thoughts, to have conversations without prescripting responses, to make decisions without consultation, to tolerate the physical discomfort of not knowing if he was saying the right thing. It was, in his words, like learning to walk after a stroke. The pathways were still there, but the automaticity was gone. He had to consciously reconstruct habits that used to be unconscious. You need to understand what recovery actually requires, because it's not abstinence. It's relearning discernment. The AI isn't inherently destructive. Your relationship with it is, and that relationship was built on a foundation of avoiding discomfort, the discomfort of uncertainty, of imperfection, of sitting with a problem your brain hasn't solved yet. Every time you reach for the chatbot, you need to ask one question: am I using this as a tool or as an escape from my own cognitive effort? If the answer is escape, even occasionally, you're still reinforcing the dependence. There's a concept in neuropsychology called cognitive reserve, your brain's resilience against damage and decline. Every time you choose effortful thought over outsourced processing, you're building that reserve. Every time you sit with confusion instead of immediately seeking an AI-generated answer, you're strengthening the neural networks that make you cognitively anti-fragile. The irony is that the discomfort you've been avoiding is the exact mechanism that builds the capacity you're losing. Struggle isn't a design flaw in human learning, it's the feature. And you've been systematically eliminating it in the name of productivity. What you call efficiency, your brain calls atrophy. So here's where you are right now. You've read this far, which means some part of you recognizes yourself in this. That recognition is the first fissure in the dissociation. What you do with it determines whether this is the moment you start rebuilding or the moment you rationalize why your situation is different, why it's not that bad, why you'll deal with it later. Later is how you end up like Marcus in July, unable to answer your phone without a script. Later is how neural pathways become permanent. Your brain is ruthlessly adaptive. The question isn't whether you can stop, it's whether you still recognize what your own thoughts sound like. If this video resonated with you, hit subscribe. Uncomfortable Truths releases new videos every day on personal finance, psychology, mindset, and productivity, and more. Turn on notifications so you never miss one. The truth is uncomfortable, but it's always worth it.